What happens when samurai meets hip-hop? In 2004, director Shinichirō Watanabe, best known for Cowboy Bebop, brought us Samurai Champloo, a mashup of Edo-era Japan with breakdance sword fights, lo-fi beats, and counterculture energy. It was wild, stylish, and unlike anything else in anime. And now Ghost of Yōtei is paying tribute with the new Watanabe Mode, blending lo-fi hip-hop into the samurai journey. 2 decades later, Champloo still feels fresh, and we're breaking down why it matters for both anime and the game. Welcome back to Nerd Legion. We are doing our Ghost of Yōtei inspiration series, and why we're doing this is partially for fun, partially to finally...
Mostly for fun.
You know...
Mostly for fun.
Partially because we finally get to watch good things, which I know you guys have noticed in the comments. You're like, oh my God, Monty and DoA are finally watching good things. And yes, these are all
revolutionary on the show.
Revolutionary.
Yeah.
I think some of you actually prefer when we watch bad things and mauled, but that's fine. The purpose of this is that we are going through some of the cinematic inspirations for Ghost of Yōtei in the lead up to the game, because we here at LFN on our general gaming channel at Last Free Nation Gaming will be reviewing and doing some content around that. I just got back from Hokkaido, actually, where I climbed Mount Yotei and have a bunch of footage that is going in and a bunch of other historical context. So if you guys are interested in the history around the game, I've been reading books. I've been going to museums literally in Hokkaido. I've been climbing the actual mountain Yotei. So there's going to be a lot of stuff there. A bunch of people from LFN are going to be getting together and working on this collectively. So it should be really fun. I'll be doing some stuff on my cooking stream as well for Ghost of Yōtei food and Hokkaido cuisine. So lots of stuff coming.
Did you see any ghosts?
Well, I am the Ghost of Yōtei because I'll never be there again, DoA.
Did you fight anyone with a sword?
You know, it's funny. I actually did go to a fake Japanese village to dress my kid up as a ninja, and there was like a ninja maze. Cool. He loved it. That was fun. So. He fought.
My question was, did you? Oh, okay. I was like, is this leading to you fighting him with a sword? Is this like a sensei versus master kind of thing, or a sensei versus student thing? Sensei versus master doesn't make any sense.
So like, yeah, I did do a little bit. I did do a little bit of that with my kid, but it was fun. It was fun. So the reason why we're doing this though is that we're looking at those cinematic inspirations, and there are some that are directly tied into the game. So as you guys, if you've seen the other episodes, might be familiar with, Throne of Blood we did for the Kurosawa mode, which was also in the first game, Ghost of Tsushima. We've also done 13 Assassins by Miike, which there is a Miike mode in the game that increases blood and mud splatter. And the final mode that they've announced is Watanabe Mode, named after Shinichirō Watanabe, who is famous probably primarily as the director of Cowboy Bebop, but he also did a series relevant to Ghost of Yōtei called Samurai Champloo, which is kind of, I guess, a cult classic. It's certainly not as well known as some of his other anime projects, particularly Bebop. But what this is in the game is that they asked Watanabe to curate a list of lo-fi music because he is famous for his inclusion of music and being inspired by music. You've seen that in Bebop, Samurai Champloo, Carol and Tuesday, which was his Netflix show. But he has really, really strong associations and often very, very good soundtracks and good musicians and composers that he works with on his television shows. So they asked him to curate a list of lo-fi hip-hop that you can listen to during the game while you're exploring Hokkaido, which is very cool and something that I will be certainly taking advantage of at points in time. And all of this comes back to a TV series that he released in 2004, so over 20 years ago now.
Was that long ago now?
Yeah. It was released on Cartoon Network on Adult Swim. And this was part of kind of the first, I would say, wave of mainstream anime adoption in the United States, at least. Outside of things like Dragon Ball or
there were certainly certain
Moon.
animes, right? There was even, I think, going back farther than that, people didn't necessarily know they were into anime, but the people that like were kids in the 80s, like me, who grew up in Voltron and stuff like that, or like Ronin Warriors, right? I mean, there was stuff all the way back in the 80s, I would say, but I would, in my opinion, the big influx of people recognizing and being like, I am an anime fan, began in like the 90s with Sailor Moon and Dragon Ball, I think are the two primary ones in my mind anyway. But this was certainly like, Cowboy Bebop kind of opened the door for this new, bigger wave that certainly dominated the early 2000s. And Samurai Champloo was one of the ones that was kind of made in some ways, according to some of the people that worked on the show, to capitalize on this. So yeah, it was apparently, as the story goes, made a little bit with Western audiences in mind even, but it still is obviously very Japanese too in content and in setting and all that. So it's an interesting one.
Yeah, and if you're not familiar, Cowboy Bebop, which you should absolutely watch, maybe the best anime of all time, and it is very Western accessible. So even if you do not like anime, there are a lot of people who do not like anime but who love Bebop, because Bebop is really different, and that is a sci-fi show with an excellent jazz soundtrack. It is cool as hell. It holds up extremely well today. It is brilliant. Do not watch the Netflix live action adaptation. Don't watch it. I refuse to watch it.
Stay far away from that. If it pops up on your feed, just give it the thumbs down immediately. Don't even like hover your mouse over it. That was a garbage show. But yeah, like, don't get me started, man. As far as anime adaptations goes, that I think was the worst one of all time. And I watch a lot of them because I hate myself apparently. But that one was definitely one of the worst. But the original, what it was, the source material, Cowboy Bebop, was, I agree. I mean, like, I don't know if it's like a normie thing to say. I don't really care if it is or not. That, like, I do think Cowboy Bebop is the best, just in terms of the animation is fantastic, the music is fantastic, the writing is fantastic. Nearly every episode is great. There's very little to no filler, which is kind of amazing. Even Samurai Champloo, we're going to talk about today, there's just one straight up filler episode. When I got to that one, I was like, oh, I hate this. But we'll talk more about that later. But yeah, Cowboy Bebop is absolutely fantastic. I've never considered myself a huge anime fan. Like, I don't watch anime for the sake of watching an anime. I'll usually like wait until people say something good and then I'll watch it. But Cowboy Bebop is one it's always on the top of my list to recommend to people. It is that good.
Yeah, it is like the entry point for many, many people into deeper anime fandom. So it's
very accessible.
It's very accessible to Western people. It doesn't require a lot of additional knowledge. It doesn't do a bunch of weird Japanese anime.
It's not FLCL
stuff. I mean, I love FLCL, but yes, FLCL.
Me too,
is
but
like
that is
deep in the sauce.
I wouldn't recommend it as someone's first anime. It's like, hey, you want to try anime? Here's FLCL.
Great soundtrack though. Great soundtrack.
Yeah. Oh, excellent soundtrack, and shares a voice actor with Samurai Champloo. We can get into that a little bit later.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So anyway, Samurai Champloo is like Watanabe's follow-up to Cowboy Bebop, and I think it was big at the time. It was also released pretty quickly on TV in America. I think a lot of people our age, i.e. old, have fond memories of Samurai Champloo, but I haven't seen this basically since it was released.
Same.
This is it was released when I was a senior in high school, I believe. So I was watching anime at that time. That's when I first saw it. And it was highly anticipated because of Watanabe's success with Bebop, and because it was a similar project, as in this is a period piece based in the Edo, aka Tokugawa shogunate period of Japan that spanned for about 250 years from 1603 up until 1868 when the Meiji Restoration happened. I'll talk about that. It's very important to the show. So it's not sci-fi, but it is a mashup of a specific time period with a musical genre, and in that way it is similar to Bebop conceptually, except instead of it being space and jazz, it is samurai and hip-hop, which sounds weird. Both of those sound weird, but the execution is actually very good.
Right. And I mean, you and I were talking about this right before we hit record on the show, but like this was, I think, a lot of people's first experience with like lo-fi. lo-fi beats, and like I obviously plenty of people knew about it before that, but for me it was my first time experiencing it. A lot of people I talked to say that was the first time they heard it. This was like before the era of like the lo-fi girl and all the hype around it. Like everybody knows lo-fi now, right? Like everyone, their grandma and their grandma's computer makes lo-fi these days, right? So, but this was like one of the first times it was really like put in front of audiences in a big way. In it, as far as I know, you know, and I've listened to it ever since. I really discovered a style of music that I didn't know a lot about or really hadn't heard much before, and I love. It became my study soundtrack for the last 3 years of college for me, and pretty much anytime I need to get like some work done and don't need like a specific soundtrack going, it's usually lo-fi for me.
Yeah, and it also featured an artist, Nujabes, who would become kind of a very big cult favorite. And a lot of that, it was happening at the time, but I would say it happened pretty much after his death as well, and partially because of Samurai Champloo, because that's where I first was introduced to this guy. And he became very popular in lo-fi circles, like I said, particularly after his death. He died very young in a car accident, unfortunately. Yeah. So, we didn't get a lot of work from this guy, but definitely has a major, major cult following today.
I mean, you just put on the soundtrack for this show, and that's like, a couple hours of enjoyment right there, and then you dig into some of his other stuff. He made, for as young as he was pretty prolific. He made a good amount of stuff. You could listen to all of it in a day, but you can go back and listen to it, over and over again, I think, because it's just so chill, right? It's just stuff you can have on in the background if you want, or it's stuff you can just sit and like really focus on and listen to. And there's a lot of stuff going on in it too. So yeah, it's too bad he, was gone way too soon, but he really did leave a pretty impressive body of work behind, and a big chunk of that is in the show.
And his reputation has really just grown over the years, in spite of obviously there being no new material. So very well respected. Like it really, I mean, it was when I was watching the show, for example, my wife wasn't really paying attention to it, but she was like, "Don't turn it off." I was listening to the soundtrack. I was listening to music. It's great. So yeah, it is. Excellent soundtrack. It really does nail the vibe. And I think, when I come back to Samurai Champloo now, what struck me was I found it enjoyable at the time that I watched it. But I've realized watching it today, first off, that I think it's aged very well. And second off, that now that I know much more about Japanese history, I enjoy this show on a much different level than I did initially. And I think that while Bebop and some of Watanabe's other shows are very accessible for Western audiences, and they don't require a lot of context, because this is set in a specific Japanese era. And I think it helps a lot to know certain things about Japanese history to enrich one's enjoyment. I'll try and say what I know. And obviously I'm going to be missing a lot of historical context, and there's a lot of, I know, language within this that really doesn't hold up in translation that also deepens the meaning. So I feel like it's hard to get this unless you are fluent in Japanese and know Japanese history to really maximize the enjoyment and appreciate it for what it is. But I will try and expound on why I enjoy this now with the knowledge that I now have in my life, especially having been to some of the places that are represented in this anime, and talk about that. And hopefully that will help people enjoy it more as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm coming into it knowing only very, very surface level Japanese history and cultural stuff. I've never studied Japan. I've been there for like a week once. Like I know very little about the culture and the history, right? I've maybe slightly more than some, but like less than most, I would say. So a lot of that stuff just flies over my head. I'll say it too. Maybe this is sacrilegious. Maybe this is another mark that DoA, am an anime normie, but I like the dub in this show.
I was only watching the sub, so I haven't heard it. But here's my hot take. Good. I prefer the Cowboy Bebop dub.
Me too.
It's
I think
really
a lot
good.
of people say that. I think that's a less hot take. I don't know if that's a hot take with this one too. But you've got, Steve Blum, the same guy that did Spike's voice in Cowboy Bebop, doing Mugen's voice in this. So you do have some familiar voices. I mentioned the FLCL connection earlier. You've got Carrie Walgren, who does the voice for Haruko in FLCL, doing the voice for Fu in this one. So you know, you've got really talented voice actors in the show on the English language side too, and I don't know. I just tried the first episode with it, and I'm like, oh, this is good. Which, for whatever reason, it seems like a lot of the Watanabe directed animes that are then dubbed get a good cast and get good English voice acting. I generally prefer to watch things subtitled as well, but I will make a few exceptions. Cowboy Bebop is one every time, and this show is one as well.
I'll watch a few of the episodes dubbed for the next one because we're only doing the first 13 episodes today. So I'll talk about that more. I'll be able to have a conversation with you more about that next time because I watched the first 13 all subbed. I didn't dip into the dub at all this time, but I will for the next episode. I do want to talk about, I think we'll probably get into a lot more of the story specifics, especially if you guys know Samurai Champloo. A lot of the really interesting stuff in the show in terms of the character arcs happens at the very, very end. And it's similar to Bebop in that way, in that both shows are very much episodic vignettes where in certain episodes it'll focus on one character and reveal something about their past or like have a big character shift in them. But unlike Bebop, I feel like Bebop, the larger narrative is given to you really early and advanced really early, whereas in Champloo, you know that they are searching for the samurai who smells like sunflowers, but that really is just not even resolved at all, or nothing even happens about
for
that until the very end of the show. If I
Do you know why that
correctly.
is? Do you know why that is, Monty?
Why?
Because so Shinichirō Watanabe was basically kind of given carte blanche, if you will, to do whatever he wanted with this series. And one of the things he wanted to do was try to, I forget the exact term they were using, something like non-structural narrative or something, but basically what it all boils down to is they didn't really plan anything in advance. So when they talked about the Sunflower Samurai and all at the beginning, they had no idea who that was. They made up the main plot as they went along, as they were making this show. So that's why at times it seems very disjointed and it seems like there's no real progress until the end. It's because they didn't write any of it really in advance like they did with Cowboy Bebop. They just made it up as they went along, which is insane to me. And I think it's one of the things that honestly brings the show down a little bit, because it doesn't have as good of a firm structure in the writing as Cowboy Bebop does, you know? That said, the show is still very enjoyable, but yeah, they apparently just kind of were making things up as they went along with this one with purpose, right?
I will say I don't necessarily hate that, because if you write a really good episode about one of these characters and it takes the character in an interesting direction that you may not have anticipated, then it can be hard to like force that character back into the box of the ending that you have created. I will also link it to...
There are good reasons for that.
I would also just link it to hip hop. Like this show is inescapably about hip hop, and part of hip hop is improvisation and freestyle rapping, right? And so in a way,
freestyle writing this show, I guess.
Freestyle writing. I'm just saying, in a way, it does fit the theme.
I think it's a cool concept, and I think if you are a mega successful director, who's just gets to do whatever he wants. As I was researching this show too, the story goes that he was pretty burnt out after doing Cowboy Bebop and then the Knockin' on Heaven's Gate movie and all that, and he just wanted to do something that was fun for him. And so I think a lot of this is what he was just having fun doing at the time. And you can tell as the episodes kind of go on where this is a show that does not take itself as seriously as Cowboy Bebop did at all. It's definitely more wild. It's out there. It's like funnier here and there. It's got its moments of drama, but this is overall, I would say, a funnier, wackier kind of show than Cowboy Bebop is, by design. And yeah, again, he just wanted apparently to have fun with it. And yep, can't blame him. I mean, he did a great job with Cowboy Bebop. He deserves to do something different and kind of have fun with it.
I want to talk about the concept of this show first, because I think that it's really important to remember what the framing of this show is when you go into it, if you want to appreciate the deeper themes. And that is really, Samurai Champloo is at its core hip-hop inspired, not just in terms of the music, but in terms of the narrative, in terms of the overall aesthetic, in terms of the core concept of hip-hop itself. Because hip-hop as a genre is a remix of older music, right? It is freestyle lyrics a lot of the time is where it came from initially. It was a counterculture movement for the most part. Now, that may seem crazy to say because obviously hip hop is very mainstream. In fact, hip hop is probably the most mainstream form of music these days. But when it was started in the 70s, and especially as it started to gain momentum in the 80s and 90s, this was still not the dominant form of music. It was a cult following where rock and roll was king, right? Throughout most of this time period. And even into the early 2000s, this is when hip hop has become much more mainstream, but probably not in Japan at this time. I'm going to go ahead and guess because it was much more mainstream in America at that point in time. But now it has become more or less the dominant form of pop music. So this is coming from a place where it was people who are in minority groups who are mostly doing it. That's the genesis of it. It comes from the Black community in America. And so it was about, a lot of times about minority experiences at the start. It is quintessentially about, taking down the powers that be. It is about commentary on, oppressive power structures. That is where hip hop comes from. And it's about taking old music and stealing bits of it in terms of samples and remixing it in a free way in order to create something entirely new, right?
I got in trouble in grade school in like 4th grade, I think it was, when my parents found a gangster rap cassette tape in my backpack. God. The album was Cop Killer, and they may have taken issue with that. But I had been borrowing my friends, rap cassettes. I'm so old, by the way. But like Coolio and Warren
Legacy
G, and
NWA
Ice
fan.
Cube, and yeah, I know, right? But like, I was living in rural Wisconsin at the time. That's where I grew up, is north central Wisconsin, just north of Wausau, if you know what I'm talking about. Shout out
possibly
to
the whitest place on earth.
Rhinelander birth. Yeah, I was born in Rhinelander. Shout out to all my Hodag fans out there. If you know, you know. But so when I was listening to the stuff, what attracted me to it first was the beats. Like the music was just good, But then I started listening to lyrics, and I'm like, I feel like I'm hearing about like an entirely different planet Earth from the one I live on. These people's experiences and lives are so different from what I experience day to day in rural Wisconsin in my hand-me-down sweatpants from my cousins and all that, so I started really appreciating it for that too, is that like, I wouldn't say I was like resonating with the message or anything like that. That went over my head at that age. I just felt like I was learning about a totally different place and a totally different life and totally different people from the people I knew. And that was cool and like very valuable to me. Then I got in trouble for it, but yeah, and my parents took issue with the language, right? There was a lot of like very rough language in a lot of the early gangster rap and all that, and pretty much every gangster rap, I suppose. And so they didn't want me repeating the naughty words, right? But it was what do you expect, right? I kept listening to it, I was just a bit better about hiding the cassette tapes, But yeah, like so I would never say I'm like a giant hip hop fan or anything like that. I don't know, I wouldn't say I'm knowledgeable about the genre or anything like that, but there was that time in my life where I listened to a lot of it in the 90s, like the mid 90s, and really liked it for like that reason. And so the beats, especially like the music itself, has always kind of stuck with me, and so I think that's one of the reasons why like why lo-fi is so appealing to me too.
Yeah, I
feel like it calls back to like that style of beats specifically back then. I don't know if that makes sense. Yeah. People feel free to tear me apart if I'm totally wrong in a musical sense, but that's how it feels to me anyway.
Yeah, and look. I don't think you have to be a huge hip hop fan in order to appreciate Samurai Champloo. You just have to understand what hip hop as a musical genre is and where it came from, because that is directly applicable to it's Watanabe taking these themes and applying them to Edo-era Japan. And that is really interesting. Sure. And that's what I really like about Samurai Champloo, is that Watanabe takes concepts about hip hop such as remixing, sampling, putting in other cultures. Like it's not about staying in a strict chronology. He pulls references across time and space and jams them into Edo Japan in anachronistic ways. And
you never know what year specifically this happens in. It could
I'll
be
talk
like
about
anywhere in a couple hundred. Yeah, it's very loose.
It's
as
a
far
250
as like
year period, and it literally
goes.
could be anywhere within that time. And it references things that happen hundreds of years apart, and has technology that happens hundreds of years apart, and also has English words in it, which would not have been used during that time period. If you watch the sub, they're English loan words that they're using. There's slang, I'm sure, in Japanese that they're using that isn't applicable here. But I think what's so brilliant about Samurai Champloo is that the themes of, okay, we're going to take all these concepts, we're going to remix them. Who is this show about? It is about people who are somewhat disenfranchised, that are on the margins of society, which is exactly where hip hop came from. It is about people who have minority identities. It is very explicitly from the first episode about people trying to push up against oppressive power structures, just like early hip hop was. You talk about your Cop Killer album. It's the same stuff in the first episode of this show, right? There are abusive authorities that are harming people who do not have status, and there are people who are pushing back against that. And so it is a counterculture, and that is what Champloo represents. So I think if you're looking at the spirit of hip hop, that is what Watanabe is trying to put into this show. And it is very deliberately making commentaries about strict hierarchical structure within Japanese society. It is playing with a lot of ideas of the Edo period, which is a very interesting time period in the first place. And he's using Japanese concepts in order to further this. And that's why I think it is hard. And it went over my head, obviously, to understand some of the stuff he was trying to do when I watched this as a teenager in the early 2000s, because you have to have at least some of a grasp of Japanese history to understand the identities of the characters that we're looking at and what that means, and why these people may be having a rough time in the main part of Japan during this time period, right?
Yeah, I mean, you've got the Ronin samurai, right? Or he's samurai, but it's not so much, I guess, that he doesn't have a lord. It's that he's kind of like on the run for killing.
Well, he's
his
also
master,
a Ronin.
basically.
I mean, he doesn't have a lord. That's just true.
Yeah, I suppose you by nature you don't. Then you've got the dude that's kind of from like the fringes of like what? Well, he was a pirate basically, and he's from more of a rural area. I guess.
He's from Ryukyu. He's from Okinawa. I'll talk about that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll talk about that.
Oh, okay. All right. Like I said, like I don't a lot of the stuff's going to go over my head. I don't know, but yeah, it's what I wanted to talk about too, and maybe this is a good time or we can wait till later, was just like the fighting styles they gave to Mugen and Jin, cuz that is a big part of the show too. The fight choreography is obviously great. But they give each of the two main characters such a very distinct method of fighting. Mugen's is very breakdance inspired. He does a lot of kicks, a lot of head spins and things like that, a lot of wild fighting, and that's by intent, right? They wanted his fighting style to be basically like breakdance fighting, which is something from comedy movies, but also something that works really well in this setting as well. But it's not just for Zoolander, is what I'm saying. But Jin's fighting style, I had read as I was researching this, was supposed to be like basically completely different in every fight scene, that he was supposed to be unpredictable and appear like samurai fight styles, but also intentionally supposed to be different every single time. And so I thought that was really interesting when I read it too, that it was supposed to invoke some of the aesthetics of typical samurai sword swinging, right? But also trying to do it in a way where you couldn't pin down a certain style and couldn't say, oh, he fights with this style, because he's kind of just supposed to be a master of everything basically, and sort of on the run too. And I guess his style is very intentionally ambiguous apparently too, which is neat. I didn't know that.
That's great. I didn't know that either. It makes a lot of sense though. And we can talk about the different identities that we have here between the characters, because that's kind of, it'll help explain the show. So Mugen, like you mentioned, he is from the Ryukyu Islands, of which Okinawa is one. These are islands that are pretty far south of Japan. They were not actually officially part of Japan until 1879, when they were taken over and turned into the Okinawa Prefecture, even though they were under control of the Japanese, but for a significant amount of time prior to that. But for most of history, the Ryukyu Islands were actually a Chinese vassal state. And so they were much culturally more similar. They are ethnically different. The people from Ryukyu are ethnically different from the Wajin ethnic people of the rest of Japan. And so these were forcibly taken by the military, but they were an independent kingdom. At the time of this show, Ryukyu would have been kind of a secret Japanese holding. And the reason why is because this is very sorry, I'm going to go into this. The reason why
for it, I'm interested in hearing
is the Ryukyu kingdom was a Chinese vassal state, like I said. So they traded very actively with China. What happened was in the 1600s, the Japanese came in and they basically subjugated the islands, but they could not appear to be in control of the Ryukyu kingdom because China refused at this time to trade with Japan. Japan wanted to trade with China. So by using the Ryukyu kingdoms, Ryukyu would trade with China and then Ryukyu would trade with Japan, and they basically just made them a middleman so they could actually engage and trade with China. So it was very important that Ryukyu remain semi-autonomous, and at least for the purposes of Chinese perspective, appear to be entirely autonomous. So Ryukyu had its own king. So what does this mean for Mugen? Mugen is not ethnically Japanese. Japanese is not his native language. It would be some dialect of Ryukyu or Okinawan. And it explains why he is an outsider in this show. He behaves very differently from everybody else, not just because of his wild personality, but his wild personality is in fact a result of him growing up in an entirely different culture, right? But he seems like frequently not to know a lot about Japanese customs or locations, which is also explained. So this is very specifically a la hip hop, an outside ethnic minority who is now engaging in mainstream Japanese culture, sometimes with disastrous results. And he is pushing back extremely hard, sometimes foolishly, against authority. And similarly, Jin, he is Japanese, ethnically Japanese, but he is also an outsider because he's a Ronin. Now, why did they choose the Edo period? The Edo period is after the Warring States or Sengoku period. This is the time in which Japan is at peace. These 250 years are a very peaceful time in Japan. The samurai didn't have a lot to do during this time period. And so they were, as we noted in 13 Assassins, for example, that also takes place during this period. And they say, explicitly, a lot of the guys we're fighting against have no battlefield experience. The reason why is because there was no battle. So there were samurai, but they were not great fighters in this time period compared to pre-1600. And also, a lot of the samurai had lost their incomes because when Tokugawa took over and became shogun, all of the enemy daimyos who tried to oppose him unifying Japan were stripped of their titles or sent to like the boundaries of the empire. And when they get stripped of their titles, the samurai who are under them, who draw their revenue and their livelihood from the lord, the daimyo, suddenly are trained warriors with no income and nothing to do. So these people became mercenaries, they became bodyguards, they did whatever the fuck they could to survive effectively. And so there were a bunch of trained warriors at the start, and then later on there may have been some Ronin who were trained, but I think most of the Ronin showed up right after the Edo period started. And these people were just kind of like Jin, outsiders, because they had lost their income. They had lost their status. They didn't even have the high status of samurai anymore. They were just swords for hire, and, you know, were just trying to make ends meet. A lot of them became very poor as a result, whereas previously they would have been high status, high wealth, for the most part, individuals. So these are people who have lost, they basically have no status in society. Then we have Fu, who's an orphan tea house serving girl. Of course, she's a woman. Not like women had a great time, you know, during this period of Japan. Their choices were be wife or be whore, which is what we see in this show for the most part. So you have these
certainly led to believe, for sure.
You know, you have these people who are very much on the outside. They are very much existing on the fringes of society. And this all comes back to, I'm sure Watanabe chose these identities very specifically because they would have a very unique place within an extremely structured hierarchical Japanese culture during this time period.
Right. No ties either, you know, so you can kind of have your characters wander around and get into whatever trouble you want them to get into because they're not tied down or restricted at all by anything of a cultural nature, right? And it's, you know, it's a show that kind of poses initially as a you know, vengeance story, right? Where it's like, I got to find the samurai that killed my family or killed my father or whatever. And it kind of just meanders around for a while. If we get into the actual, like the content of the show, I think the first episode is fantastic. It's a very tight story. It's really good. It blends all the different things they're trying to blend in the show very, very well. And I feel like that first episode is so different from like the other episodes in that the other ones, they feel so kind of loose and, you know, not necessarily as well planned out. Story wise, animation is always great, right? Music is always great, but like there's a level of tightness to that first episode that I really wish existed through the rest of the series, because it just doesn't. And like that's another thing that that's what I was talking about earlier, where I think I like Cowboy Bebop a little bit better, where it was kind of planned from the beginning, and I get why they did things the way they did in this show, but I do feel like it's a little bit too all over the place for me. But I still like it, but it's definitely below Cowboy Bebop by a significant margin for me. But
yeah, I agree.
What do you think?
The first episode of Samurai Champloo is really remarkable, and I think people will very much enjoy it because it's cool. It's just so cool. Like the animation is great. The fighting is great. The way that they choose to integrate two different fights happening simultaneously in two different locations via the record scratching and the video moving back and forth and having these elements like the straw hat flipping in the air in order to like record scratch and then transition into the other one. It feels like a DJ mixing two different songs simultaneously. It's just so stylish. You know what? It's so thematically well done. It's just sick. It's really good.
And they don't do it in any of the other episodes, at least not in the first 13. And that bugs the crap out of me because because it is so good and it does feel very true to what the theme of what they're trying to do in the show is. And then they just don't do it. Like they barely use those kinds of little cuts and transitions and incorporating some of the more hip hop kind of stuff, you know, visually, and scene switching wise. They don't really do that in the other episodes, hardly at all. And so I almost feel like we're kind of given, you were kind of led to believe the series is going to be one way. And then it sort of is like that, but a lighter version for the next 12 episodes. And then episode 12 is just straight up like, it's just a filler episode. It's just, Dear Diary, this is, you know, this is what happened in the first half of the series. And I was like, do you really need to do that?
Yes, they did. And the reason is because, to be fair, many animes of this time period and earlier did have a recap episode because this would have all been released weekly originally in Japan. Sure. And so if you are doing that, it can be helpful to catch people up who have not seen the rest of the show or who might have missed something. So for the format in which it was released in 2004, this would have been both common and good. But I agree, now it sucks.
Didn't need it. Cowboy Bebop didn't need it. They didn't need filler episodes. You know, they didn't need recap
It's actually
episodes.
One of the rare... Bebop is actually one of the rare animes that didn't have one of these. I remember many of these episodes. So you just skip it. It's whatever.
Yeah. Episode 12 can be skipped. It's like, I'll just tell you the whole episode. They get a hold of Fu's diary and they read her diary, which is like, ooh, hee hee. And then it's just her diary is just a recap of everything that's happened so far. And then at the end, Fu like has written a bunch of like kind of like mean stuff about Mugen and Jin through the entire thing. And at the end, she's like, I wrote all that mean stuff because I knew you guys would read my diary at some point, LOL. And that's how it ends, which is like, it's kind of funny, sure. But like the joke is not worth an entire recap episode.
Yeah.
So, you know, and if you go from Cowboy Bebop to this series, you kind of are feeling like, all right, Sunflower Samurai, let's get this main premise going. And it just really doesn't, except for, you know, one line from one of the side characters in episode saying she should go and check out, what was it?
Nagasaki.
Nagasaki? Yeah, Nagasaki. Go look at Nagasaki. And that's the only thing we get connected to the premise of the entire plot in the first 13 episodes. And so you really do kind of like, you're like, okay, I like this show. It's cool. It's fun. But like, let's get to the plot at some point, you know, and we just don't get there for the first half of the series. And watching through this again, I'm like, yeah, this is fun, but like, what are you doing?
To be fair, the choice of having the samurai who smells like sunflowers as the object of pursuit, as the MacGuffin more or less of this show, is apt thematically, because sunflowers don't really have a scent. And also, what's very interesting, going back to the hip hop theme, is that sunflowers are native to North America. So they would have been part of the Columbian exchange. And I was doing some research on this, and sunflowers arrived in Japan during the Edo period. So during the time period of this anime.
They talk about that too.
Yeah. And they arrived from China. They were introduced to China from Russia, and they were introduced to Russia from the rest of Europe, who had brought them over from the Americas. And so this is another point of hip hop where we're getting the mashup where East is meeting West. And it also explains why people in the show don't know what sunflowers are. Because while there are large fields of sunflowers today in Japan, particularly in Hokkaido, there are not, people would not know what sunflowers were really. And furthermore, the sunflowers don't really have a scent. So when she keeps talking about the samurai who smells of sunflowers, that in its own way is a clue that this is not really something that is findable in a way. Like the method of locating this person is almost impossible. Because first off, again, nobody knows what sunflowers are. Second off, sunflowers don't have a scent. So it's kind of built into the very idea of this, which is that it is a journey that is very difficult, and the object that you're seeking is almost impossible to find. Now we can argue
directionless, sure,
yeah, very directionless. Like we can argue that that's a bad idea, but the idea itself is reinforced via the symbols that they have chosen. So.
All right, sure. That may be true, but I think for most people watching, you're kind of looking for a little bit of progress and some sort of a main storyline, because it's episodic in nature, but one of the things that an episodic show needs to do is have character growth pretty much every episode. You know, you can have fun ones here and there, but you need to see your characters growing and learning and changing, and there is a little bit of that. But it feels to me anyway, like there's not enough of it in the first half to warrant how episodic it is.
I'm curious to go back and see now, next week we'll do the second half and see if that's true, because I feel like it really did pick up in the character growth as we got closer to the end of the first 13 episodes. The episode,
like I said, there was some, I just feel like there wasn't enough.
I agree, especially early on, but I was encouraged by the fact that we have this really good episode with Jin and the woman who is whoring herself out for her gambling debts. Like, that is an excellent episode.
That's
13 with Mugen and meeting some of the other people he knew from Ryukyu is very interesting. So it does feel like, although it was much more directionless, say in the first 8 or 9 episodes, as we get closer to episode 13, where we ended today, outside of the recap episode, there was a lot more strong and interesting stuff happening.
I think, again, like I haven't seen this since it first came out either, but I feel like I do remember the second half being stronger than the first half. So we'll have to wait and see. I haven't watched the last 13 yet.
But yes, I agree. Compared to Bebop, where you're very quickly introduced to Vicious and the Red Dragon Syndicate and Julia, and you're given these things that play out throughout the rest of the show, it is weaker at the start for sure. Outside of, you're just like, the first episode is just so cool and so flashy and so fun that you're just like, you're really amped. And then it's just like, wait, where's this going? I feel like I've been let down a little bit.
It really does. You feel like you've been let on for sure a little bit.
I also want to, I've been very glowing in this, but I do think that some of my main issues are not that the characters are individually uninteresting, but the fact that we're supposed to believe that Mugen and Jin are just going to follow Fu, this 15-year-old girl, around forever. It just feels like there's not a lot of reason for them to stick around and do that. And she puts it as, I mean, it's all based on this stupid coin toss that they do, which, like, I mean, these are two adult men who probably would not do the things here. I mean, it feels like the way that these characters are pushed together and stay together is very forced. And unfortunately, what this show fails to do is to do that initial thing and then give the characters additional reasons to stick together, right? And it just doesn't do that.
They don't really grow together as a unit, you know? And to be fair, there's still plenty of scenes and plenty of episodes where Mugen and Jin are on the verge of just abandoning her, and then they're like, you know, it's kind of like they feel a little bit bad, but they really just don't have anything better to do. So they come back. But yeah, I agree that's very loose. And like, I'm sorry, like Fu is just one of the least interesting characters in like anime history, in my opinion. Like, she's just kind of there. You and I talked about this. You sent me a message like last week or something, like Fu gets captured all the time. And I'm like,
the main driver of the plot is her getting kidnapped.
Yeah, she's got slightly more character development than Daisy in the very first Mario Brothers game, you know?
Well,
where she's got slightly more character development than sorry, our princess is in another castle. That's basically the level of the character we have here.
And you know, people, there could be a criticism that this would be like too dark of a road for this show to tread down, but I don't really feel like it because prostitution is actually everywhere in this show. But making Fu's life after her mother's death, not just like, oh, we're threatening to make you a prostitute, but like literally just actually a 15-year-old prostitute, and have her pushing back against the system that enabled that, is frankly just a much more interesting storyline for her that they're just afraid they're afraid to explore.
I agree that is darker than the show is intending to go. I think that was certainly an option, but I think that was not a tonal direction that they wanted. Well,
I think that if in the spirit of the hip hop, you know, of the hip hop roots of this show, that is a much more like interesting take. And in my mind, they do a good job of showing the foreigner identity of Mugen pushing back against Japanese culture and the Ronin identity of Jin pushing back against Japanese culture, but they don't really explore like what it meant to be a female during this time period. And with Fu specifically, they do with other characters.
It's interesting because they put a lot of other characters, side characters, like one episode characters in that position you're talking about. There's a lot of like,
that's what I'm saying.
Abused,
just do it with Fu. Like, why are we doing
tertiarily
it with side characters? We could just literally do it with the main character and have the show be much more impactful.
They didn't want to do it to the main character because they wanted to maintain that lighter tone to the show. If you put that much emotional baggage on your main female lead, then that brings down the whole vibe. And they wanted to keep the vibes high, but still remind people about, you know, the realities of prostitution during this period, apparently, because there sure are a lot of prostitutes in the show, and Fu like is almost there a couple times, but never quite gets there. And like, of course she never will, right? Because they don't want to put her in that position, but they certainly want to show it, you know. So I agree there's that too, where it's like they feel very obligated to have that included in the show, but they just don't want to do it to the main character.
I'm just shocked, you know, because by the time we got to the Jin episode, where we're literally showing a woman forced into prostitution to cover her husband's gambling debts, her husband is being physically abusive to her. I'm like, we could have had this with Fu, and then by the way, Jin feels a compulsion to protect this woman, in which case Jin would feel a compulsion to protect Fu, which would actually make much more sense for why all of these people stay together this whole time. So I guess I'm just frustrated because there are some really good story moments that just don't involve Fu for whatever reason.
Yeah, I mean, there's no other way to say it. She's just kind of a boring character, at least for the first 13 episodes. We'll see how the next half plays out, you know? And like I said, I vaguely, this is 21 years ago now, but I vaguely remember the second half of the show being better than the first half, but I guess we'll wait and see, you know? And I don't think this is a bad show at all. Like I've been kind of hard on it, but I think I feel like I need to be extra hard on it because there's the comparison to Cowboy Bebop. Like the bar has been set high. And so, I just feel like I expected a little bit more, because everything else in the show is so good, right? The animation, the music, every other aspect of the show is top notch, right? But the writing just doesn't quite get there, at least in the first half anyway. We'll see again how the second half goes.
It's an uneven experience. There are some like really meh episodes. I wouldn't say that I thought any of the episodes were bad, but like there's some really bland episodes, and then there's some really good episodes. So it ends up being like, I don't know, like 6.5 out of 10, 7 out of 10 so far, I would say.
Yeah, I'd probably be around there. Yeah, 6.5 out of 10 probably for the first.
I haven't hated my time watching it, and like I will say that
it's been fun to watch
conceptually, it's really strong, and that's what kind of keeps me going. Is I'm very interested in how they explore the relationship of the history and the music and the concepts of hip hop. I mean, even the name of the show. So the name Samurai Champloo comes from the Okinawan word champuru, which is a stir-fried dish, and it means to mix everything up. So they call it samurai, mixed up samurai, basically, which is exactly what the show is. And it's representative of hip hop. And even champuru, the most famous version, I've been to Okinawa, the most common version you see there of champuru is Goya champuru, which is bitter melon, which is a Chinese crop in a Japanese like stir fry made in a ethnically non-Japanese place. So it is a fusion, a hybrid meal that was created between different cultures and is, super popular in Okinawa and the former Ryukyu kingdom. So like the name is indicative of what this is thematically as well. And look, man, there's some parts of this that I just think are so creative and so fun. Like I love the fact that they just do these asides. Like here's Vincent van Gogh, hundreds of years later.
That's when the show is at its best, I think.
Here's the ukiyo-e, which is the Japanese woodblock printing. And it was actually Fu with the sunflowers that inspired Van Gogh to create impressionist paintings of sunflowers centuries later because he was so thrilled by this thing that came back from Japan. And that's such a cool idea because, like I said, the sunflower came from America, went to Europe, went to Asia, went to Japan, then inspired a woodblock print of traditional Japanese art with a non-Japanese plant that then went back to Europe and centuries later inspired impressionist paintings. Like that's just fucking cool. And like in a way that Watanabe he's showing that hip hop is world history. And like the concepts of hip hop and the idea of sampling and the idea of not just being inspired by previous works, but just literally stealing, just literally taking the snippet that you want and applying it to a new piece of art. And that's just sick. Like, it's such like, I love that he did that in that episode. And so while the execution isn't always amazing, the concept is just really strong. It's really good.
The premise absolutely carries the show for sure. And yeah, that things like that are the high notes. I think, the high points in the first, 13 episodes, probably the last 13 episodes too. We'll see. But yeah, those little anecdotes, those setups, all that stuff is neat. I think that is one of the more fun episodes out of the first 13. It's certainly one that stands out a little bit more. You've got the like detective guy that's in English. He keeps saying Pete's sake for some reason. And I don't know what it is in the subtitled version, but like he keeps saying that in the English version. It's very funny. But the whole woodblock thing, the Van Gogh part, like that is one of the better episodes for sure.
The Dutch foreigners coming because the gay Dutch foreigner coming because he heard about, he read this Japanese book in the Netherlands about male love. And again, this is a guy who's on the fringes of his own society, who's looking for something and looking for more mainstream like acceptance that he thinks he will find in Japan. But in the subtitle version, I don't know if you watched that episode subtitle, it is fucking hilarious because his accent in Japanese is just like so funny because it's basically,
they give him a funny accent in English too.
Yeah, but it's just like he's like so obviously not Japanese, but that's the whole point. Is like they're saying, oh, well, you're not Japanese, we're looking for the European. You know who else isn't Japanese? Mugen is not Japanese, right?
There you go. Yeah, I mean, like, but that's I think what we kind of have discovered is that this show works best when they really do, take the concept to the maximum, right? And the problem is that there's a good amount of shows in the first, or episodes in the first half, that don't do that, so it's just an uneven experience. And that's the main thing I remember about watching this the first time, is that it's just uneven, where I remember there were certain parts of it I really liked, but there were other parts of it that I was bored enough by that I never went back and watched it. Whereas I've watched Cowboy Bebop like infinity times.
I think I've probably seen all of Cowboy Bebop upwards of like 20 times. It's not an exaggeration.
Same. Yeah, I've watched it many, many times too. And I never skip an episode. I never fast forward through anything. I love every single episode of that show. And the movie as well. So it's different, right? Samurai Champloo is a much more uneven experience, but maybe that kind of comes with it being a little bit more high concept too, and it's harder to consistently execute on that concept, especially if you're making up things as you go along, which, you're making up things as you go along because of the concept, but I think you have to acknowledge that it's not always going to be home runs, right? So, I like this show. I've always had a positive opinion of this show. But watching it again has kind of confirmed my vague memories where it was a good concept and they hit it sometimes, but they didn't really hit it enough for me to, want to rewatch it a lot, basically,
Well, maybe our opinions will change next week. I generally agree with you, DoA. I think I'm having more fun with it now because, like I said, I've been doing a lot of reading and studying and trips to Japan. So I feel like I can appreciate it in a different way. And hopefully like some of the knowledge that I've talked about here helps other people who want to appreciate it in a different way, because I definitely get more out of it than I did when I originally watched it because of that. But cool. I also think that very nature makes it less approachable to English language audiences and Western audiences, which Bebop absolutely is not. Like Bebop doesn't fuck with a lot of Japanese cultural context. In fact, it is just very explicitly not super Japanese at all. So yeah.
More or less. That said, if you haven't seen Samurai Champloo, go watch the first 13 episodes at least. Get
first episode such a banger, man.
Like, yeah, I mean, at least watch the first episode. And if you want to stop there, that's fine. I think if you want to just enjoy it as a short film, that's great too. You can watch episode 1 in a vacuum and never touch the series again. But I do think it's worth at least one watch through.
Yeah. So, and it's obviously very much tied into Ghost of Yōtei, like so explicitly. And you can see that regardless of the ultimate success of this and how, is it one of the greatest animes of all time? No, but the concept is so strong that 20 years later, we have a Watanabe mode in a AAA video game that's coming out because
I'm definitely playing it in that mode.
The people who watched this vibed with the concept of lo-fi samurai so hard that it still resonates enough that they wanted to pursue this. Talk to Watanabe, pay Watanabe to have him curate the playlist, have him involved in the production of this game. And both of us are excited about it, even though this is our first watch through in 20 years. We just remember it. It's like it sticks with you in such a strong way. And it's just testament to the power of the concept, really.
It's been fun to go back to for sure with that. I had seen too, I believe the Watanabe mode in Ghost of Yōtei also like blows out some of the colors a little bit too.
Oh, does it?
Like some of the pinks and reds and things. Yeah, it makes things a little bit more vibrant, if I remember right. I'd have to go back and watch their explainer video, but I thought I remember that being part of it too. But either way, the music will be enough for me. But yeah, so I'm looking forward to watching the next half of it this coming week. That'll be a ton of fun. And we'll see how the series ends up. Like I said, I think it's definitely not one of the all-time best animes, but I think it's one of the all-time best concepts for an anime.
Which is actually very high praise for anime, because oftentimes anime has excellent concepts. And like the problem with anime is like concept, somebody explains an anime to you and the concept is like, holy shit, that sounds amazing. And then the execution is like, oh, I'm watching this and the execution is shit. Like that's the problem with anime most of the time, in my experience, is that if you just describe whatever it is, it sounds super cool. And usually the first episode is super cool. I still think Death Note is probably one of the best first episodes of anything I have ever seen. And the first 13 episodes are all good. And then it just like nosedives precipitously.
Yeah, we all know. We all know when L kicks the bucket, spoiler alert, that's when it goes downhill. But I think other ones like that, I mean, Attack on Titan, great concept and pretty solid execution early on, and then we kind of all know where that one ended up too. Sword Art Online.
Oh my god,
neat,
dude!
really
The
concept.
The execution versus concept of Sword Art Online is one of the biggest gulfs I have ever seen. Where that show,
I liked a lot of the first season. I liked a good amount of the first season, and then when it got to like sister brother love kind of thing,
dude,
and it's
the concept
they're not stepbrother and sister, right? Like I'm not getting this wrong, am I? I'm pretty sure, but it's it goes in a interesting direction, shall we say.
It's even just like the problem is the concept is good, but the main character is such like cringe. Like I'm an introverted nerd, but I'm secretly the best at this video game, and I'm so powerful and cool. And I'm like a beta player. Get me out.
He was a beater, Monty. He was a beater. Remember? But I love some things about that show, because I love the episode where him and his girlfriend are trapped in the game, and they just say, forget everything, forget the whole quest. We're just going to go off and live in a cabin far away from everything else and just live out our lives, you know? And that's kind of neat that you have the heroes just abandon the entire, quest for a little while, which is totally something that would be logical to do if you were a person stuck in this game. And if you died in the game, you die in real life. If you're theoretically going to live out the rest of your life hooked up to this machine, why not just be peaceful, right? And I like the exploration of virtual experience versus real real world experience that it explores. So again, great concept. Sometimes lacking in execution, but that goes along with what we're talking about. There, we could go on. We could probably do a whole episode about high concept, poor execution anime, I think.
Anyway, instead, spend your time watching Paranoia Agent, which was Satoshi Kon's only anime series, and also all of Satoshi Kon's movies. And if you're interested in that, go watch our Tokyo Godfathers episode of Foreplay, which is on this channel.
Or go back and watch the original Mobile Suit Gundam series from the late 70s. Fantastic show. You can watch the condensed movie version on Netflix, I suppose. But I think you should watch the entire series. I love it. Come for the big mecha, stay for the disco. It's great,
as they say. All right, we'll hit up the second half of Samurai Champloo next week, guys. Hope you enjoyed it.